The Tag on the Key. Book 1, The Plan. Chapter 20, PTSD Attack. That was not all that happened that year, the year that I was 14 years old. One day, my mother was supposed to pick me up at school. She first went to hear a lecture at the Jewish Community Center. Elie Wiesel was speaking there. In the middle of his presentation, he recounted the story of the Sonderkommando and the plot to blow up the number 4 crematorium. Who were the Sonderkommando and what did they do? These lucky guys, all male prisoners, were singled out for special work at the crematoria. This was the name for the death factory, where unsuspecting Jews would stand in line, enter, undress, and then they would be locked into the sealed shower room, which was really a gas chamber. Then they would take a shower of Zyklon B poison gas. After the shower finished, it took 10 to 20 minutes until everyone in the sealed room was dead. The dead bodies were then removed from the gas chamber and loaded one by one into the ovens and incinerated. The ash was disposed of. That was what the Sonderkommando did. These men were given a choice. Sonderkommando work was for a fixed period of 4 months, and it was supposed to be top secret. No one was to know what they were doing. At the end of this time, they would be murdered and replaced by a new group of Sonderkommando. They were not forced to do this awful work. They had the option to refuse, in which case they were killed on the spot. The Sonderkommando decided to blow up crematorium number 4 at Auschwitz-Birkenau. As Elie Wiesel recounted this story, my mother totally lost all sense of composure. She started screaming, shrieking, sobbing, and wailing in front of the entire audience seated in the auditorium. She managed to drive from the Jewish Community Center to the school to pick me up. When I got into the car, however, she told me that there was no way that she was going to drive on the highway in the state of mind that she was in. She had to calm down. She told me then about the plan to blow up number 4, how she had worked in the ammunition factory in Auschwitz and helped to smuggle gunpowder to the Sonderkommando. They succeeded to blow up the crematorium as planned, but 400 Jews were rounded up and executed. They executed almost all initially, but saved a few for interrogation. Those men gave up the names of 4 women before they were executed. My mother was so terrified that she would be named by those women who knew her, so she buried the whole incident deep inside her in order to stay calm and avoid arousing suspicion. Indeed, she thought that she had succeeded in totally forgetting it. It was as if it had never happened. Those 4 women who were named by the Sonderkommando were tortured for 3 months and only gave up names of people whom they knew to be dead. They were hanged outside the barracks where the women who worked in the munitions factory were kept. My mother said, and this is a quote, day and night, we had to watch them hanging." End of quote. That was January 5th and 6th of 1945. As I might have mentioned, crematorium number 4 was the largest of the crematoria and never functioned again. My mother held that story inside of her for 25 years. And on that day, she passed it on to me. It took me another 50 years to make closure with that story. Chapter 21, Israel Visit. I had a chance to go to Israel that summer, and I jumped at the opportunity. It was such a liberating experience to come and set foot in my homeland. the Jewish country. Those years in Israel, the years between the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, were magical and euphoric years for Israelis, and it was absolutely contagious. Everyone felt as though he was on top of the world. Building was going on everywhere in Israel, and there were all kinds of plans being made by Israelis in all walks of life. It was a boom time for tourism. There were so many people going and coming. Our group was based mostly in the south, near Ashkelon. I recall distinctly the intense heat and the bright sunlight. I recall that I was squinting much more because of the sunlight than I did in the States. Could it be that the sun was brighter in Israel? No matter. This was my place. I'll just have to get better sunglasses. When I set foot in Jerusalem for the first time, I felt something really special. I knew that this was going to be the place where I would spend most of my life. I was absolutely in love with the place itself. I didn't speak Hebrew except for a few words here and there, but I was sure that with time, I could become proficient enough in speaking Hebrew. I would learn to speak the language. In Israel, I felt that I could do anything, and in Jerusalem, I knew I could. We saw many things on the tour, but Jerusalem, the Old City, the Western Wall, these were the major highlights, not religiously, but rather Jewishly, perhaps some would say nationalistically. While in Jerusalem, we went to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. It was a profound experience. I'm not really sure what it was that I saw there or heard there. Things started to go black and blacker. There was a tingling, fuzzy sensation until there was no sensation at all. I passed out, and people helped me up and got me to sit in a chair in the shade. They gave me something to drink. In one way, it was embarrassing because many people were looking at me and talking about me. The people in charge of the tour told me that it was from the sun, from the heat. They stressed the importance of drinking. From my perspective, I looked at it a little differently, though. It was clear to me that it was a part of the Holocaust trauma. These things didn't happen to me in the desert or in Eilat. When we visited those areas of the country, which were incomparably hotter and drier than Jerusalem. It didn't happen to me in Masada, where I climbed up the steep mountain trail in the morning heat and charged down the snake path under a blazing midday sun. Nah, I knew what it was, and I would just have to recognize it for what it was. Nevertheless, keeping hydrated is always a good idea in Israel. It was like a dream. Needless to say, I came back to the States more determined than ever to go and live in Israel one day. That was my dream, and it continued to be so. Chapter 22, Another Year. So I came back to America from my trip to Israel. I was very inspired. I felt a greater sense of security somehow. Israel was a strong part of my identity, and so it was a natural thing for me to go there one day to spend my life. There was no inspiration at all, though, regarding the upcoming school year. There certainly was no sense of security. I really hated that school. It seemed that the only ones willing to be my friends were the people that no one else wanted to be friends with. It made me feel like I was second best, less than, worthless, a loser. I didn't want to feel like that, and I firmly rejected attempts by anyone to put me in such a place. I was still the son of heroes. Truly, I didn't do anything to deserve the title. Still, the burden of that legacy was always heavy upon me. The school days were long. I left home before 7 in the morning and came back after 6 at night. I didn't complain about that, but there was a lot of wasted time that I had to spend. For example, it was necessary to wait for my ride to come. School was finished at 3, and my ride wasn't there until 5 at earliest. Boredom is not desirable for teenagers. One student who also had to wait after school for a ride home was a very good piano player. He could sing too. Moreover, he used to play all the latest rock music, banging out tunes on an old upright piano in the chapel. The authorities did not like this, but they were not around during those hours. It was during this time that the friendship between my old kindergarten friend Stephen Plotkin and I took root again. It was good to have someone to talk to. We enjoyed many of the same things, such as playing guitar and hitchhiking around town. There wasn't that much to do. We were too young to get a driver's license. And how much could you walk? So we just hitched rides all over the place to see how far we could get. Stephen went to a different private school. When I say that it was different, I didn't just mean that it was different. I meant that it was different. There was no dress code. Students were allowed to smoke in the main meeting room where there were big ashtrays. Every student was expected to participate in the cleaning up of the school at the end of each day. It was a haven for the counterculture. I thought that I would like to go and see that school and possibly go and learn there, if I could only persuade my parents to let me go. The pressure of this school that I was in was really too much for me at that point. I also had a friend who lived down the hill from us. His name was Dave Norman. He and his brother and sister were all adopted children. He was a very active and fun-loving guy. We used to do a lot together. I don't know how his parents survived us. There was a reservoir of the Town of Manchester Water Department that could be accessed from just behind his yard. A dirt road led through a pine forest to a large, open area with a big man-made freshwater lake. If you looked at it, you could see that it wasn't natural. It also happened that there were lots of fish there. Even though there were many signs there warning of no trespassing, fishing, or hunting, it was a favorite place for us to trespass and fish. Many of those signs were proudly hanging up in our bedrooms. We used to love to fish. I remember how proud I was of myself when I caught my first fish, a bullhead or a catfish. There were lots of pickerel there, and they were really fun to catch because they would fight you as you tried to reel them in. Dave used to like to fly fish near the bridge in the shallow water. He would catch bluegills, and we would fry them and eat them. It was not long before we became a strong group of 3. We would go all over the place, hitchhiking together, fishing, skiing, ice skating, etc. Dave and Stephen have been close for many years and are still in touch with each other as they both live in southern Connecticut. Stephen is married. Dave is married with kids, as far as I know. An interesting note here is that his sister searched for and found her birth mother. His brother was also reunited with his birth mother. However, his birth mother was the one who searched for him, as I've been given to understand.